Joining us now, Pat Buchanan. He doesn't need a soundbite played correctly to get him on the right analysis, because this is one of those moments for the United States where I can tell you I am glad we have President Trump in there and not Hillary Clinton. Pat Buchanan is with us. Of course, one of our absolute favorites, author, and a commentator, has worked for how many presidents, Pat? 4 presidents? I always lose track. 3, 4, 5?
3. You got 3.
Pat,
not that long with President Ford.
Oh, that's right. I was going to say Eisenhower, Pat, but you were still over there in Gonzaga then, right?
Right.
Having fun. Pat, let's talk about yesterday, and we'll move forward to today. That moment in the speech, again, for some reason we cut the soundbite off in a bizarre place, but that moment in the speech where he said, do we have the will to stand up to those who don't respect our borders, don't respect the meaning of our citizenship, don't respect who we are as a people? Do we have the courage to preserve our civilization? Tell me about that and what that harkened back to.
Well, Donald Trump, I thought it was an excellent speech because it did touch directly on one of the great threats to our civilization, Western civilization, which was born of Christianity, and which it has existed basically in some form or another for thousands of years. And does it have the will to survive? Now, he also talked about Western values. What do we agree on and disagree about? What are Western values? So I think, to me, who's written a book 12 years ago or 15 years ago called The Death of the West, I thought it was an excellent speech, and of course it set people off all over the media and the rest of it, because I think what Trump has touched on is something deeply basic, something internal in Western civilization. The famous James Burnham book in 1964 that I reviewed at the Old Globe Democrat was called The Suicide of the West. And he argued that certain beliefs were eating at the core of the West and its capacity to resist its enemies without and within that could bring it down. And so he used the term the suicide of the West. I think Trump, he has raised to me an extraordinarily interesting issue. Let me just make one little anecdote. Last week, I read in the Washington Post, I believe it was, in Russia, 1 million people had lined up for miles over a month to kiss the relics of St. Nicholas. This is not Stalin's Soviet Union. It is modern Russia, which is different. At the same time, Germany celebrated the fact that it institutionalized same-sex marriage across Germany. So when you're talking about values and beliefs, what are we really talking about? I think Trump has raised some of the great issues of our time.
And I also loved his hearkening back, Pat, to John Paul II in what he meant, what he represented to the Polish people, of course, as the first Polish pope, and to the world, because he looked into the face of totalitarianism and he said, you can't destroy us. You might have power over us, but you don't have our power of prayer. And Trump, the fact that President Trump went to that moment and reminded the world, he was speaking to the world and to the United States, that without God in our lives, darkness will enter. Darkness will be there.
Exactly. And you take, for example, Poland, of course, is the outstanding example. It lived for 5 years under Nazi occupation and all the atrocities and murders, the Warsaw Uprising, the Warsaw Ghetto, all the death camps were on Polish soil put there by the Nazis. And then for the next 45 years, beginning with Joseph Stalin until 53, it was under the most brutalitarian communist dictatorships, which was utterly at war with Christianity. But all of these countries of Eastern Europe that were under that boot for almost half a century, they rose up to be countries again based on their views and values. And now are they still holding on to this? But his point is exceedingly well taken. This is Solzhenitsyn. God is not dead. Without God, what have you got? Who is the author of Western civilization? What are the ideas that created the West? And and what it is, there's a certain war going on internally against sort of, if you will, cultural Marxism or secular liberalism, call it what you want, which is rooted in the highest good as simply being democracy, et cetera, et cetera. And so Trump touched on that, and then he went on to the idea that, you are being invaded, and can you stop the invasion from the South? And it's a very real question whether Europe has the will and the belief and the conviction to stop the invasion, or whether it even cares.
We're talking to Pat Buchanan here on the Laura Ingraham Show. The criticism that Donald Trump is receiving from the media, it goes like this. Trump is not standing up, they said yesterday, for American values. In fact, what he's doing is he's giving comfort to the Polish president, who has been cracking down on media outlets in his own country, because he's taking on CNN, he's taking on NBC, and he's not standing up for American values. I thought that speech was all about American values. When I heard that, I was like, it's about freedom, about liberty, about life, pro-life. It was about patriotism and sovereignty and nation states. And I mean, I don't know how much more pro-American it could get.
Well, folks talk about, about the battle here that Trump touched on, and he came down on the side, basically, of America being a unique, great, different country, and we want to preserve what it is and what it believes, as against, if you will, the Merkel transnationalism in Germany, and we're all in this together, sort of a transnational approach. And Trump's talking about, America and its unique character, and it's a religious character, if you will. And this is one of the great struggles inside the West. And Poland clearly identifies itself, that let Poland be Poland, we used to say in the Reagan era, remember?
Mm-hmm.
And get the communists off their back and let them be the people and nation and unique nation that they are. And one of those is deeply rooted in the Catholicism of Poland and the fact that belief in God. I mean, the Poles have historically been deeply religious and deeply defiant of anyone outside imposing their will upon them. And as Trump pointed out, from 1795 to 1919, Poland did not even exist. It divided up between Germans, Austrians, and Russians.
No, and the Polish people, and I'm very proud of my Polish heritage today. I'm half Polish. My mother was 100% Polish. Her parents were born in Poland, Austria, Poland, that area, and they're very proud people. They're very hardworking, extremely proud, and he touched on that. It was moving.
It was a wonderful thing to do.
It was moving.
Talk about
it was
peoplehood.
moving.
Yeah, I did not see the speech live. I was downtown, but I came back and somebody told me, here's the speech, but I went and got the entire text and read it. And I was profoundly moved at parts of it. I remember as a kid, reading about the uprising in the uprising in Warsaw when Stalin's Russian army stood across on the other side of the Vistula River and watched the Polish patriots be crushed and slaughtered by the Nazis, and then they moved on the Nazis after the Poles were crushed. It's one of the horrendous events of World War II, a good indicator of the character of Joe Stalin. But we used to, talk about these things when you were growing up, and I credit Trump for bringing these up.
And I will say this until I'm blue in the face, but to have a U.S. president go overseas and stand for those who are most vulnerable, and we recognize the dignity of all human life, the dignity of human beings. We are human beings. That was really important to say in this era of discarding the inconvenient, the Charlie Gard story in Europe, just discarding someone or allowing them to die when a parent wants to see if they could do anything to help. He was speaking to that yesterday too. The power of the atheist, agnostic, or secular progressive culture, or the culture of death, has ushered in a new type of death for Western Europe. And I'm so excited that he talked about that.
Well, that's why they're after him. But there is a horrible utilitarian idea about people that when they're like used machines and tools and cars or something, just throw them away when they're no longer useful. If you don't want it, get rid of it. And this idea has really crept in, it overwhelmed the West. and he's speaking defiantly of it. Are we going to remain who we are and were, or are we going to go under in terms of our views and values, and have the West, if you will, cease to be the unique civilization and the greatest civilization that must have set them off, the greatest civilization ever created?
Well, and today the focus is on Putin and Donald Trump. You know, they're zeroing in on the handshake, Pat. Oh, it looked very cordial. The handshake looked cordial. Yeah. Meanwhile, we had old George Bush in 2001 looking into Putin's soul and seeing a man. Yeah, looking at his soul. He's a good man. He wants the best for his country. And you had the reset button with Hillary, screwing that up. You had John Kerry running over to Moscow all those times at the end of the administration, got nothing out of it. And Donald Trump said, look, none of that stuff worked, so I'm going to try something else. None of the stuff that you did worked.
He was elected because the American people said, when Trump went out and said, look, if they're going to give us a hand getting rid of ISIS, I'll work with these guys. Good heavens, did they think that FDR didn't work with Joe Stalin? I mean, Joe Stalin makes, Vladimir Putin look like, an Eagle Scout. I mean, what gets me also is everybody on TV says the first thing Trump has to do is really brace Putin and go after him. Why did you hack poor John Podesta?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean? Every American president I've known of or worked for or have in my lifetime has tried to reach out and get along with the Russians because we're the two most powerful nations on earth, and we got to avoid the kind of war that, thank God, we avoided for 45 years of Cold War. And they want Trump to go in there, and slap him across the face a couple of times, starting off. So I think Trump's instincts are probably better than the advice of the foreign policy elites.
Pat Buchanan, we love having you on, love your perspective. There were Reagan-esque moments in that speech yesterday in Poland. I wish my mother were alive to see it. She would have loved it, I know that.
They're very moving. They're very moving because they're rooted right in a wonderful reality about Poland.
And the American tradition, our alliance with Poland, and recognizing the hardship that they have been through. Western Europe likes to kick Poland to the curb. That was like Merkel thinks she's better than the Poles. The Germans think they're better than the Poles. They just do. That's just the way it is. And guess what? We saw where the United States stands yesterday. There's no apology tour for the United States. Pat Buchanan, love having you on. Thank you so much. We'll take a break.